What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have two individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Thursday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From a Navy officer testifying to lawmakers about the deadly strike on an alleged drug smuggling boat, to day 3 of Luigi Mangione's pretrial hearing over the killing of healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. But first, let's take a look at some of the other top headlines of today. The New York Times is suing the Defense Department over a controversial press policy. The lawsuit filed today challenges rules that require Pentagon reporters to pledge not to seek any information the government has not authorized for release. The Times says the policy violates First Amendment press freedoms. Dozens of reporters from major news outlets turned in their press badges rather than sign that agreement when it took effect in October. Russian President Vladimir Putin says his 5-hour talks with U.S. envoys on ending the Ukraine war were, quote, necessary and useful, but also, quote, difficult work. Putin told India Today TV that some of the proposals were unacceptable to the Kremlin. His comments come as President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner are set to meet with Ukraine's lead negotiator in Miami today for further talks. The CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee meets this week to consider major changes to childhood immunization schedules. The committee is expected to revise recommendations for the hepatitis B shot given to newborns. Former CDC and FDA officials warn in public letters that these changes could put children's health at risk. One study found delaying the birth dose could result in 1,400 or more preventable infections annually. Infants infected with hepatitis B at birth face a nearly 90% risk of chronic disease. Young Americans deeply pessimistic about the state of democracy and the economy. That's according to a new Harvard poll. Just 1/3 of adults under 30 view the U.S. as a healthy democracy, while 64% say the system is failing. Economic concerns dominate their worries, with nearly 30% naming financial issues as their top concern. Despite those concerns, however, only about half say they'll definitely vote next year, and just 28% consider themselves politically engaged. And scary moments here. Dramatic video from California shows a U.S. Air Force Thunderbird crashing during a training mission. The F-16 fighter jet went down near Trona Wednesday and burst into flames. The pilot ejected safely before the crash and was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Video shows a massive cloud of black smoke you see there rising from that wreckage. A sobering new independent report warns the biggest names in AI, the firms behind ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, are still falling dangerously short when it comes to safety. These findings come from the 2025 Future of Life Institute's AI Safety Index. That's an assessment of 8 leading AI companies and their readiness to guard against misuse and even existential risks.
We all know that companies have set their ambitions to march towards superintelligence, to march toward AGI, where, in the past blog post, some of the tech CEOs have referred to it as a new species. And how that really means is that we are potentially creating something that is more powerful than human power can actually monitor and control. And I think with that kind of dreams that the companies are selling, there definitely comes with responsibilities where we would love to see companies having more concrete plans of control.
So to help us break down what this means for everyday users and society as a whole, our business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett joins us with more on this. And Maura, what does this mean for everyday users, and basically for all of us who think, oh, let me try this out on ChatGPT or Gemini or any of those?
Well, Holly, I mean, you and I have had so many conversations about some of the risks that we've seen and issues that users have run into when using generative AI or these AI chatbots. Most recently, obviously, those cases around mental health and users talking to ChatGPT as if it's their therapist. And so this has raised a lot of red flags. And so we're learning a lot of the play-by-play, the specifics that artificial intelligence experts are calling out, saying, hey, these safety elements need to be more focused on. And so, unfortunately, this report doesn't necessarily come as a surprise. The safety index basically found that all 8 companies that they reviewed are talking a really big game on safety, but not actually backing it up with real safeguards. And so a panel of experts dug through each company's public statements, and they sent out surveys for them to answer. Not all of them, including Meta, answered those surveys, I should note. And then the panel graded them on 35 different safety benchmarks. That includes pretty simple things like watermarking AI-generated images so people know that they're not real, and then all the way to whether employees feel safe about speaking up about problems inside the company. And that's something that we've covered in terms of whistleblower hearings as well. And when you look at these grades overall on your screen, it's pretty rough. Anthropic and OpenAI scored the highest, but that's still only a C+, which is technically passing. Google also came in at a C, but everyone else was in the D range, with Alibaba at a D-. And so all of this just goes to show that these systems are getting more powerful very quickly, but that safety practices and the oversight that these researchers are saying is necessary just aren't keeping pace. I actually was just able to have a conversation with the lead researcher, and her big takeaway and recommendation is that there ultimately needs to be more regulation, which we've seen conversations about, and transparency from the companies themselves, so that users like you and me that are using this technology actually have a sense about how they're rating themselves, how they're prioritizing users' overall safety, Holly.
Maura, did the companies respond to this? Have they said anything about whether they're going to fix it or new implementations to prevent misuse of the AI tools?
So all in all, and we've seen this across the board in the plethora of lawsuits that I've covered, companies, and in response to this report, companies have maintained that they stand by the way that their models are built. They've also said that their newer models, these upgrades that we've seen, especially from Gemini, ChatGPT, for example, in the last couple of weeks, are a lot safer. And so I asked the researcher about this, hey, do you see this as accurate? Do you think that this is something viewers and users should feel confident about? And she did say that the upgrades are a good sign. The newer models are generally a little safer, a little bit more reliable. But based on my conversation and the report, the improvements just aren't happening fast enough. And the safety element is a lack of priority for tech companies. And the biggest concern she mentioned, as I said before, is the transparency. And so they really recommend that companies start sharing a lot more about how they're testing the models and bring in truly independent safety evaluators. A lot of these were happening internal. And then the other element is they want more effort into preventing things like AI psychosis, which is when a system starts generating harmful or delusional content. We've seen a lot of that with hallucinations, for example, that people have called out. And ultimately, they want to see companies scale back their lobbying, their financial interests, so that there's room for real and independent oversight. And so ultimately, there's this gap widening between safety and the company's developments, and then this just leaves the whole sector kind of structurally unprepared for the risks it's creating, according to these researchers, Holly.
All right, Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett live for us. Interesting update. Thank you. Coming up on Today As It Happened.
I think they've spent a lot of time killing each other, and now they're going to spend a lot of time hugging, holding hands, and taking advantage of the United States of America economically like every other country does. So they're going to do very well.
And later,
Any American who sees the video that I saw will see the United States military attacking shipwrecked sailors.
welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
We have come to the U.S. Institute of Peace to sign a historic agreement that will end one of the longest-running conflicts anywhere in the world, with far more than 10 million people killed. Today we commit to stopping decades of violence and bloodshed and to begin a new era of harmony and cooperation between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda.
President Trump with the leaders of both the DRC and Rwanda. Both leaders, as you can see, set to sign an agreement that will signal the beginning of the end of the conflict between those two nations. Keep in mind, just yesterday, there was cross-border fighting between both countries. Millions of people in that region have been displaced. 10 million have been killed, dating back to the times of King Leopold of Belgium, the colonization of Africa, and the death of Patrice Lumumba in Congo. As was the case when the U.S. first entered into the dialogue about the future of the region, this one involves precious minerals. Let's go right now to our White House correspondent, Haley Bull, who is live on the North Lawn, as she is always. Haley, the president saying he has brokered now 8 peace deals. This is among those 8.
Yeah, Del, this is a significant one among those peace deals that the White House is touting as the leaders are lauding a peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda. President Trump, in those remarks you just heard, saying he thinks they will get along well, and he has confidence in the leaders to maintain their commitments. Now, we are seeing several agreements play out at once in this. Earlier in the year, they came to an agreement between the Congo and M23, a rebel group believed backed by Rwanda, though the country has denied that. And the peace agreement signed by the foreign ministers earlier in the summer and cemented during this ceremony today, and that which the U.S. and Qatar have taken a role in overseeing its implementation. The agreement has called for a peaceful resolution to disputes, territorial integrity, provisions for refugees, ending support for and ensuring armed groups stop hostilities and disarm, launching an economic framework, which in particular calls for expanding trade when it comes to critical minerals. The president announcing that they are also signing bilateral agreements between the United States and each country to gain access to rare earth material in those nations. But Del, as you mentioned, as peace is declared here, violence has continued, particularly in the Congo. And so more broadly, there are a lot of eyes watching for how this agreement holds, if at all, and its implementation. This ceremony is coming, though, as President Trump has touted being a peacemaker, as he has eyed the Nobel Peace Prize, frequently talking about it. And though he is celebrating these peace agreements in the backdrop today, Dow, peace between the Ukraine and Russia, what has been a major agenda item for President Trump, has remained elusive. We understand today Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, as well as the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are meeting in Florida with Ukraine's lead negotiator, Rustem Umerov, after both Kushner and Witkoff met in Moscow with Putin this week, and as the Ukrainians have met with their European allies, as they have all worked to refine a potential peace plan. Now, this is a second meeting in Florida between the U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators in a matter of days. It comes, though, after we have not seen any concrete agreement following that meeting in Russia, rather continued shuttle diplomacy, Del.
And the meeting taking place today, right now, at the newly renamed Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace, just west of the State Department in Washington, D.C. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull for us live on the North Lawn. Haley, thank you very much.
And now let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day.
California launching a new online portal for people to report misconduct by federal agents. That is Governor Gavin Newsom. The portal allows residents to submit videos and photos of what they think are federal officers breaking the law. California's Attorney General Rob Bonta saying the Trump administration is engaging in a campaign of terror that has left communities scarred. He cited those unmarked military-style vehicles and detainments that resemble kidnappings. In his words, the Attorney General saying federal agents can enforce federal laws but must do so without breaking the law. A self-described Waymo vehicle running over a dog. It happened Sunday night in San Francisco. The dog wasn't leashed. It suffered injuries so severe it had to be put down. A passenger in the Waymo vehicle posted on Reddit that his family was coming back from a tree lighting ceremony when the collision occurred. He said his kids started crying and his wife began screaming. Earlier this month, a Waymo killed a beloved bodega cat. Waymo says its vehicles have an 11 times lower rate of injury causing crashes compared to human drivers.
Straight ahead on Today's It Happened.
I saw 2 survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs bound for the United States back over so they could stay in the fight. and potentially, given all the context we heard, of other narco-terrorist boats in the area coming to their aid to recover their cargo and recover those narco-terrorists.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's jump right back into our rundown of our top stories of the day.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have two individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States. Under the DoD manual for abiding by the laws of armed conflict, the specific example given of an impermissible action is attacking a shipwreck. Any American who sees the video that I saw will see the United States military attacking shipwrecked sailors.
At this hour, lawmakers continue to express concerns about that so-called double tap on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean. The Navy admiral who ordered the missile strike is on Capitol Hill. He has been there all morning long. Legal experts say the attack is a crime if the survivors were targeted. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle say someone has to be held responsible. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed joins us live from Capitol Hill. And Nate, the meetings are behind closed doors, but already we're starting to learn exactly what happened inside.
Yeah, we're learning that there were more details about those strikes on those suspected narco traffickers in the Caribbean, including the fact that apparently it was 4 strikes on that boat on September 2nd, not the 2 that had been previously reported. That, according to the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Tom Cotton, who also told reporters he has no issues with the Trump administration's justification for that attack, and furthermore says he's got complete confidence in everyone involved. Take a listen.
I saw 2 survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs bound for the United States back over so they could stay in the fight. And potentially, given all the context we heard, of other narco-terrorist boats in the area coming to their aid to recover their cargo and recover those narco-terrorists. And just like you would blow up a boat off of the Somali coast or the Yemeni coast, and you'd come back and strike it again if it still had terrorists and it still had explosives or missiles, Admiral Bradley and Secretary Hegseth did exactly what we would expect them to do. Admiral Bradley was very clear that he was given no such order, not to give no quarter or to kill them all. He was given an order that, of course, was written down in great detail, as our military always does.
But was there a vocal order as well?
There's no vocal order either.
And look, the partisan divide beginning to show itself on Capitol Hill. We're hearing Republicans largely satisfied with the explanations that were given. A bit of a different tune than what we saw over the weekend when we saw those statements from the Senate and House Armed Services Committee, where the chairman and ranking members, Democrats and Republicans, banding together to say that they want to conduct rigorous oversight of these strikes as they learned about that second strike. Now lawmakers who saw that video, Democratic lawmakers who saw that video, saying that they have some serious concerns here, much to the opposite of what we've heard from Republicans. I want to read you a statement here from Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He said in part, quote, "I am deeply disturbed by what I saw this morning. The Department of Defense has no choice but to release the complete, unedited footage of the September 2nd strike, as the president has agreed to do. The briefing confirmed my worst fears about the nature of the Trump administration's military activities." He continued saying that he wants to conduct additional oversight here of the actions from the Department of Defense, which the Trump administration calls the Department of War. Now, to be clear, this partisan divide, seemingly a new thing, Republicans largely defending the Trump administration, Democrats saying they have some serious concerns here. And Del, it's amazing how much the narrative has changed in a way over the past 12 hours, of course, since Admiral Bradley came up here to Capitol Hill. Even some Democrats who say they have concerns about the way in which the video showed that attack taking place, still making clear that they have faith in Admiral Bradley. That, at least, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Jim Himes, telling reporters that earlier today.
Hopefully the public can make their own decisions as the tape, according to the president, will be released. We will wait and see. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, under fire again surrounding Signalgate this time after a new Pentagon report has been issued. What did it say?
That new Pentagon report effectively saying that the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has the authority to declassify documents. So the fact that that information ended up in a encrypted but unclassified app certainly the defense secretary's own prerogative, but at the same time, there was information in there that was classified as secret, operational war plans from the United States that could have potentially put service members in harm's way if that information was leaked out to foreign intelligence sources. Of course, the targets of these strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. Again, Democrats looking at this very different angle from Republicans. Democrats calling this a completely careless, saying that they believe that Hegseth should resign. Many of them have been making statements similar to that for months now, especially those who've re-upped those statements following the news of that secondary strike on those suspected narco boats in the Caribbean. What's interesting here is Republicans largely saying that this exonerates Hegseth and that he can move on with his duties as Secretary of Defense, putting this chapter behind him. One thing that report does make clear that there needs to be a different method of communication moving forward. Again, that unclassified signal chat appearing all throughout that report. Again, it is up to the Secretary of Defense. He's one of the people who can determine if information is classified or not. At the same time, that report definitely making clear that American service members could have been injured if that information made its way off of that encrypted but unclassified publicly available app Signal.
Three bodies weighing in on this particular report: Democrats, Republicans, and yes, members of the armed forces. Our congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed live on Capitol Hill. Nate, as always, thanks for keeping us up to date.
You're watching Today as It Happened. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. So let's pick up right where we left off.
Admiral Bradley has a storied career, and he has my respect, and he should have the respect of all of us. But what I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service.
The Navy admiral, who reports say ordered that strike on survivors of an attack on an alleged drug boat, briefed lawmakers today. Both sides of the aisle wanting to know what happened on September 2nd. Washington Post reporting that Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley issued the order to comply with Secretary Pete Hegseth's order to kill everyone. Firing on survivors would be considered a war crime, some legal experts say. Joined now by our political director, Andrew Rafferty. And Rafferty, the president's approval rating has been tanking because Americans say he's not focusing enough on the economy. Now we're spending all of our time talking about those drug boats in the Caribbean and double tapping. Yeah. How do Americans feel about what they're seeing?
You know, Del, it is interesting, and I think it's fair to say that there is a fair amount of skepticism among the American public about what is going on in Venezuela and the Caribbean. This was some polling that was done, and it is worth noting that this polling was done before the most recent controversy. So public attitudes may have changed as the public consciousness becomes more aware of this. But this is overall support for strikes on suspected drug boats. And you see there a slight majority of the public does approve. That's driven mostly by Republicans. But what Nate was actually just talking about when it comes to releasing more evidence, more sort of transparency on these strikes, well, you see here that a strong majority of the country, 75%, say the U.S. does need to show some evidence that these strikes are targeted at what they call narco-terrorists, people that are actually smuggling very dangerous drugs into the country. Overall, the American people don't have much of an appetite for overall interventions, specifically anything in the country of Venezuela. There's a strong majority, about 70%, say they would oppose a military intervention. And so it is interesting, Del, right now, the debate among the so-called MAGA Republicans is happening online in the podcast sphere. There is now turning into a debate over what intervention actually means. Of course, this was a president who ran on the idea of America first, kind of withdrawing from the world stage when it came to military conflict. Now they're among his most loyal supporters sort of debating, well, what does actually intervention mean? And that's sort of going along with the lines that President Trump has said that a strike could be forthcoming.
Meanwhile, whataboutism reigns supreme in Washington, D.C. President Obama facing criticism, even from inside his own party, for his expanded use of military drones during counterterrorism actions there. The Republicans point to that and say, President Obama did it. So
Yeah.
what's different then? Is it a fair comparison?
Well, look, we both covered that period as a bit of a throwback to what President Obama did. He did vastly expand the use of drones, a program that was started under George W. Bush. It was, when it was all said and done, almost 550 drone strikes, 3,700 deaths, most of those in Yemen, Pakistan, Somalia. One thing that is most certainly not accurate is that the President Obama somehow acted without criticism or scrutiny. Right. There were congressional hearings. There was a number of concerned members of his own party at the time. I think the other thing, we've kind of heard this from Mark Warner and some of the members of the Senate who were around during President Barack Obama, is that that was at least a targeted operation in the global war on terror, which was a very specific threat. That's not to justify all those strikes. There were, we know, civilians certainly were killed in those, as opposed to what's going on in Venezuela right now, where the threat is not as clear. And that actually in the polling does bear out as well, because the American people say they don't really understand exactly what the president's getting at, what the threat exactly is from Venezuela. Even the types of drugs that are on these boats it seems to be unclear for these strikes. And so I think that's a difference worth keeping an eye on. And President Obama did face a fair amount of scrutiny.
There's also the release of a drug kingpin, which really has a lot to do with the polling numbers that we're seeing as well. Scripps News Political Director Andrew Rafferty. Raph, as always, thank you. Today, in answer to a 5-year-old mystery, on the evening of January 5th, 2021, someone placed a pipe bomb near the offices of the Democratic National and Republican National Committees in Washington, D.C. No one was injured, but federal agents said both devices could have been lethal. Well, today we find out who authorities think that someone is. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra joins us now. And Patrick, a short time ago, we heard from investigators about who the suspect is and what led to his arrest. But what else did we learn?
Well, and actually, we're also learning a lot from this. This is the affidavit in support of a criminal complaint. The man's name, Brian Cole. That's the suspect, 30 years old. He's from Woodbridge, Virginia, which is about a half-hour drive from Washington, D.C. We have been searching for any sort of criminal past involving this suspect. We've not found anything. We are told that he lived with his mother and father at that home in Woodbridge, and we just got some video in a short time ago of a search underway this morning by federal law enforcement of that house. In that criminal complaint, we're getting a better idea about why this case went cold for so many years. There's something very key in this complaint, and that is that the components that the suspect allegedly purchased to build these bombs, we're talking about the end caps, the pipes themselves, the steel wool, those were all purchased over time, beginning in 2019, then for a few months in 2020, then a few months would elapse, then he would get more according to these authorities. So that would explain why it was so difficult to perhaps retrace where these bombs actually came from. Authorities also saying that the suspect's cell phone was in contact with towers near the DNC and the RNC, and that his license plate had been picked up by DC police here in Washington on January 5th. That is the night before January 6th. But the big question still is, what was the motive? Why did this suspect do this, according to those doing this investigation? And there's not an answer to that, not anything that is being shared just yet. But there is no doubt about it. The Attorney General, as well as the head of the FBI, they say that after 5 years, they believe that they got their suspect. And they pointed out that it wasn't that new evidence had come to light. And keep in mind, there had been a $500,000 reward offer for evidence, but that they assembled a new team to actually say, okay, let's take a look at this cold case. Let's go through all the evidence. And it was only then that they said, actually, we have the answers right in front of us. A ton of data that they poured through. This is how the Attorney General described that breakthrough.
Let me be clear. There was no new tip. There was no new witness. Just good, diligent police work and prosecutorial work, working as a team along with ATF, Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police Department, and of course, the FBI.
And that suspect, Brian Cole, now facing charges for that explosive device placement. More charges likely to come, but Just to remind people, this was a massive mystery. How is it possible that someone could place pipe bombs near the DNC and the RNC, coming just 20 feet away from where, at the time, Vice President Kamala Harris passed by? This was a person who was wandering this area for almost an hour, undetected. There was talk that perhaps it was an inside job. The number 2, Dan Bongino at the FBI, saying that himself before today, that was something that he thought was a possibility. But now, no mention of any inside job. But still, Del, at the moment, we don't really know what this was all about.
Also fascinating that if he spent that much time assembling a bomb, it didn't go off. You would think that the expertise that went into making that pipe bomb would have been successful, but in this case, luck stopped those bombs from not going off and perhaps saving the life of Kamala Harris.
Absolutely, and the authorities have always been very clear that these were real bombs. These were not dummy devices.
Right.
They could have gone off, they could have been lethal. Fortunately, they weren't.
Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra for us as always. Patrick, thank you very much.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, the defense attorneys for accused killer Luigi Mangione are arguing in court to exclude certain evidence seized in a Pennsylvania fast food restaurant where Mangione was arrested. Scripps News correspondent Alex Miller has been tracking this high-profile case from the beginning. So stay right here for her reporting from the courthouse straight ahead. Thanks for joining us again on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
Federal Vaccine Advisory Committee now delaying that decision on whether newborns should still get the hepatitis B vaccine the day they're born. For decades, the government has advised that all babies be vaccinated against the liver infection right after birth. But now the committee is looking at whether to recommend the birth dose only for babies whose mothers test positive for hepatitis B. That vote is now scheduled to happen sometime tomorrow. Millions of Americans, by the way, who buy health insurance through the Affordable Care Act marketplace could lose their coverage next year. That according to a new survey from the nonprofit health policy research organization. If Congress doesn't extend the credits and premium payments, they could actually double for 22 million people. 1 in 4 enrollees say they would likely go without health insurance if their monthly payments doubled. Another third saying they would look for cheaper plans with higher deductibles. 8 in 10 enrollees want Congress to extend those tax credits. That includes 7 in 10 Republicans. Congress is expected to vote on this issue sometime this month. Michigan Supreme Court could prevent law enforcement from making civil arrests inside courtrooms. It would include suspected non-citizens. If adopted, the amendment would add Michigan to the list of states attempting to stop ICE from arresting someone after they come out of court or even in court. Several states, including New York, Connecticut, and Illinois, have already done so. The Trump administration has been unsuccessful in challenging those same policies in other states with sanctuary measures. It's been more than a year since United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down on the streets of Manhattan. Luigi Mangione is the man charged with his murder, spending the day inside court today, listening to officers recounting his arrest. Mangione's lawyers are fighting to keep his backpack and its contents out of evidence in the trial. They say it was searched without a warrant. His team also saying his Fourth Amendment rights were violated. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live outside the courtroom in New York City. And Alex, this is the second day in a row that just one witness took the stand, this time Officer Thomas Fry. What type of insight did he provide?
Yeah, Del, the judge just telling both sides that they need to speed it up, that this is not the official trial, but they certainly have been treating it like it is. Trying to build a case to explain why they felt that Luigi Mangione's backpack needed to be searched that day. That's why we have seen the body camera over and over again. Today, again, we watched more body camera footage, this time from the perspective of Thomas Fry. He's a 26-year-old, 2-year veteran of the force, and he was one of 2 officers first to arrive on the scene at the McDonald's that morning. He is the one who really paid closest attention to Luigi Mangione as the other officers were running his fake ID, and he's one of the people who had a really small conversation with him. He also told us that over to police department that Mangione asked the officers their names and he apologized for any inconvenience he may have caused. And today we saw much more detailed footage of what happened when Luigi Mangione went into that precinct. He was strip searched. He was given a search, one that required the approval of a supervisor than they typically do. Fry just a couple of minutes ago saying that it was abnormal for it to be that detailed of a search. The video was blurred, but we saw Luigi Mangione taking off parts of his clothes because only one layer of clothing is allowed for somebody who has been arrested. He was wearing long johns, so he needed to take those off and put his jeans back on. He also handed over a necklace that he was wearing that had a USB device. Respectful to the officers as they were asking him many questions about his address, his work history. They also asked him for his emergency contact. He didn't want to give one at first, ended up giving his mother's name. Now, we saw a couple of days ago a folded up piece of paper taken out of Mangione's pocket at the McDonald's. We didn't know what that was, but today we saw an image of what it is. It is a to-do list that he had from the day prior where he said that he went to Best Buy where he purchased USBs as well as a digital camera and his plans for the future. He was planning to have an intel check. He was planning to make a survival kit. And he had a long list of things that he needed to buy, like water bottles, trash bags, batteries, more masks. Gives you a little bit of a window into really what he was dealing with as he was being arrested. He also had a bus ticket on his body when they went to search him that he purchased on the day of the shooting under the name Sam Dawson from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. So again, piecing together the timeline here. But one thing that the defense is trying to outline right now is the officers said they searched the backpack because they wanted to do so for their safety. So when we heard from the defense today, they really drove home the point that these officers really didn't believe that they were in any sort of danger, asking Fry directly if there was anything Mangione had done while he was in his custody, eating his breakfast, wiping off his mouth that made him feel unsafe. And the officer said, no, I didn't feel unsafe during these moments. Nothing made him nervous. And so when they also asked how many officers ended up showing up to the scene, we learned that there were 13 officers, Del, who showed up to the scene that morning. Only 30 officers in total were on duty that morning. And so there's a question of why did so many people need to be there that morning if their safety really wasn't in danger.
Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller live for us in New York City today. Alex, we thank you very much.
Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
This was not the fatal dose. What this doctor was charged with was illegally distributing ketamine to Perry, not causing his death.
The doctor who sold ketamine to Matthew Perry before the Friends star's overdose death was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison. Dr. Salvador Plasencia pleaded guilty to illegally selling the actor large amounts of the drug, despite knowing he was a struggling addict. Prosecutors were asking for a 3-year prison sentence as part of a plea deal, which includes no sentencing guarantees. The judge could have given Plasencia up to 40 years. The doctor is the first of 5 defendants to be sentenced in connection with Matthew Perry's death. For more on that sentence, we're joined by Lauren Johnson Norris. She's a defense attorney in Orange County, California. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Holly. Thanks for having me.
So an assistant U.S. attorney called Dr. Plasencia, quote, a drug dealer in a white coat. There was a text where the doctor called Matthew Perry a moron, and it was clear he was trying to see how much money they could make from the actor. The doctor even admitted his guilt. He could have been sentenced up to 4 decades in prison, yet he was only given 30 months. So are you surprised, and do you think this was the right sentence?
I'm not surprised because the conduct here was especially egregious. Anytime a medical professional isn't in society, because we expect that doctors will see someone like Perry who's an addict and not take advantage of that. In fact, try to help treat him. In addition to that, we've got the balance of Placentia entering an early guilty plea, taking responsibility. So that's mitigating. So when you balance sort of the aggravation and the mitigation, you end up just about at this place.
But do you think he should have been sentenced to more prison time, considering what you just mentioned? He knew he was an addict. He knew he had a lot of money. He said he called him basically a moron. Do you think that he should have gotten more, considering he could have gotten up to 40 years in jail?
Well, he certainly could have gotten more, but remember, the prosecutors were not asking for 40 years. While passions are inflamed because Matthew Perry ultimately died as a result of the prescriptions that he's received, this was not the fatal dose. What this doctor was charged with was illegally distributing ketamine to Perry, not causing his death. And so when we look at the conduct alone here, this is rather an appropriate sentence based on what he actually did.
So 4 others now have pleaded guilty as well. So what do you expect their prison sentences might be after learning how long Dr. Placencia will be in jail?
Well, each one of them played a different role in Perry's life and ultimately in Perry's death. We have just a regular drug dealer. We have his assistant, another doctor, and others who helped contribute to this, horrible scenario. I think that the court will look at first whether they take responsibility early and express remorse, as well as their role in the conduct, and then how egregious that role in the conduct was and how directly that tied to his death. So the court will look at each individual set of facts and all of those factors in making that decision.
So what impact did the victim impact statements from Matthew Perry's parents have, do you think, on that judge's final decision?
Victim impact statements are important, but they are not the only thing that a court will consider. I think that they are always listened to, the judge considers, but we assume that any time that someone has perished, that their family is going to be incredibly sad and asking for a lot of punishment. At the same time, we have to make sure to know that while he contributed to his death, he was not the one who prescribed the final dose. And so on the balance, I think the court's probably considered all of that with the victim impact only in part.
Yeah, and to that point, his defense team argued he was reckless but did not intend for Matthew Perry's death. How does intent affect sentencing in a drug distribution case that results in death?
I think it would be hard to prove that anyone who played a role in this case intended for Matthew Perry to die. But the situation here is who had responsibility, specifically a doctor, to help heal this patient instead of aggravating this patient's illness. And when you look at a doctor who wasn't a gatekeeper and should have been, had an ethical duty to do that and a legal duty to do that, I think that all of that comes to play.
Defense attorney Lauren Johnson Norris, thank you for your time and for your insights on this story. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending some of your evening with us here on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have an excellent Thursday night.